The purpose of this lecture is to introduce you to a basic anatomy and physiology of cardiovascular system, also often referred to as a circulatory system. On the end of this lecture, you should be able to recognize the differences between human circulatory system and the circulatory system of other animals. Recognize and describe different types of blood vessels and their function in human body. You will be able to identify different parts of the heart, trace body going through the blood vessels, get understanding of some heart conditions and nature of heart contractions. Also, you will learn about lymphatic system, since it is a part of the circulatory system besides playing a central function in our immune system. Immune system and lymphatic system will be discussed in a separate lecture dedicated to a human immune response. As was stated in our first lecture, blood is fluid connective tissue that consists of three types of elements. That is erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes. They emerge in a fluid matrix called plasma. The blood is never still. It is moving around through the body all the time. This movement of blood in the body of any organisms, including humans, is called circulation. So here are functions of the blood. It supplies oxygen to the cell and tissues. It supplies nutrients to the cells. It removes waste product. It defends us from infections. Most of the human body is water, with an average of roughly 60%. The amount of water in the body changes slightly with age, sex, hydration levels. While the average percentage of water in a person's body is around 60, the average can vary from roughly 45% to 75%. For example, babies have high percentage of water in their bodies, which decreases with age. Also, fatty tissue contains less water than muscle, so the percentage of water can vary with body type. Human body and bodies of other vertebrates are mostly aqueous environments. The liquid part of the animal tissue is both inside the cells, intracellular fluid, and between the cells, intercellular fluid. As you can clearly see from the diagram presented on this slide, the extracellular fluid has two primary constituents, and that is fluid component of blood called plasma and interstitial fluid that surrounds all cells not in the blood. The circulatory system of vertebrates is made up of system of tubes, the blood vessels, and propulsive organ, the heart. This is closed circulation because the circulating medium, the blood, is confined to vessels throughout the journey from the heart to the tissue and back again. Many invertebrates have open circulation. They have no capillaries or veins. The blood is pumped from the heart into blood vessels, then open into tissue spaces. The blood circulates freely on direct contact with the cells and then re-enters open blood vessels to be propelled forward again. In invertebrates having open circulatory system, there is no clear separation of extracellular fluid into plasma and interstitial fluid, as there is no closed systems. Closed systems are more suitable for large and active animals because the blood can be moved rapidly to the tissue needed it. Both open and circulatory system move blood throughout the organism, providing exchange of nutrients, oxygen for waste products, carbon dioxide at the cellular level. Closed circulatory systems work in parallel with a cooperative system, the lymphatic system. It is a fluid pickup system. It recollects the tissue fluid called lymph that has been squeezed out through the walls of the capillaries and returns into the blood circulation. In a sense, closed circulatory system is not absolutely closed because fluid is constantly leaking out of the tissue spaces. However, this leakage is but a small fraction of the total blood flow. The blood goes to every part of your body. It makes its way into the hard bone and the teeth. If you push a fine needle throughout the skin at any place on the body, some blood will run out. About 1/13 of the weight of the body is blood. Divide your weight in pounds by 13 and the answer will be about the number of pounds of blood you have. If the body loses more than 20% of its blood, one could go into a hemorrhagic shock, which is when the heart slows down and cannot circulate enough blood around the body. Blood pressure plummets when this happens, and there is a massive drop in body temperature. If the body loses more than 40% of its blood, all the organs start to shut down and death is likely. The heart is situated right in the middle of your chest, precisely at the middle of your lungs, not on the left side of the chest as some of you might think. Heart is a double-sided pump and pump only. It does not care about your feelings or poetry. It does not make you happy or feel sad if you got dumped by your sweetheart. It is a biological pump, but as you will see from this lecture, it is an amazing pump. As I mentioned on the beginning, blood is moving around through the body all the time. What makes blood moving through our body? You say heart does it? That is correct. The heart beats all day and all night. The only rest it ever gets is the short time between beats. Someone has calculated that heart of a man approaching the end of his life has beat more than 2.5 billion times and pumps 300,000 tons of blood. If your heart should get badly out of order or should stop just for a minute, you will die if there will be no medical help available. The blood is forced out by the heart arteries. The veins carry blood back to the heart. Thus, heart consists of two receiving chambers called atria and the bottom two pumping chambers called ventricles. All the blood in the body passes through the heart every 2 minutes. What I just did, I quickly overviewed the circulatory system, and now it's time to go over some details. But before we go into the structures of the heart and blood vessels, I would like you to remember one very important thing about the blood in human body. Not to get lost in the circulatory system, one has to remember that there is two types of blood in our body. The rest of understanding is more or less depend on the common sense. So there is two types of blood in your body: oxygenated and deoxygenated. The names of two types of our blood are self-explanatory. Oxygenated blood is oxygen-rich blood, and deoxygenated is oxygen-poor blood. Red blood cells are filled with protein molecules hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has iron, which gives the red color, and when it binds to oxygen, it's turned bright red. That is why when the blood is oxygenated, it is bright red. Deoxygenated blood is high in carbon dioxide because it went through the body tissues and pick up this waste product of cellular respiration. As you remember, cellular respiration is a process of making ATP molecules that give energy to the biochemical reactions in the body. Oxygenated blood has low concentration of carbon dioxide since its hemoglobin molecules are bound to oxygen. Blood in the arteries carries oxygen and nutrients to the cells. As cells use the oxygen and nutrients delivered by arteries, they create waste products, including carbon dioxide. This is why deoxygenated blood has less nutrients and more waste products. So after oxygenated blood goes through the tissues, it's become deoxygenated. All the goodies are taken. So this blood returns to the right side of the heart, specifically to the right atrium. Then enters the right ventricle and gets pumped into the lung where it picks up oxygen. Then returns to the left side of the heart, which will make it another journey to body tissues. Deoxygenated blood runs mostly through veins, while oxygenated blood runs mostly through arteries. For our convenience, in textbooks, the color code for deoxygenated blood is blue, and the code for oxygenated blood is red. This does not mean that the blood could be blue. Veins that usually carry deoxygenated blood do look bluish, but this is an only optical illusion. They actually are of yellowish, orange, or reddish hue with low chroma. The reason why we see our veins blue is complex. You see, different colors have different wavelengths. For example, white light contains the full spectrum of colors and wavelengths. Red light has the longest wavelengths, which allows to travel further below the skin surface where your veins are located. The red blood or hemoglobin in the veins absorbs the red light, so you may not see the red. Blue light, on the other hand, does not travel as far. So when white light penetrates your skin, you only see blue. In a way, your eyes are playing trick on you. Unlike arteries, veins are closer to the skin surface. Therefore, it is easier for you to spot them. In fish, a cold-blooded animal, blood circulation is very simple. Like in all vertebrates, fishes have closed circulatory system. The circuit made by blood is simple, but blood following a circuit path from heart to gills to body tissues and back to heart. The heart is considered to be essentially a two-chambered pumping device, and that is, fish has only one auricle and one ventricle, which send the blood to get both oxygen and nutrients. But still, there is no mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood occurs, because blood aerated in the capillaries, small blood vessels of the gills, and then goes straight from the gills to the systemic circulation, that is to say, body tissue, without first returning to the heart. That is to say, blood goes from the heart to gills to body tissue and back to heart. In human, both oxygenated and deoxygenated blood goes through the heart, but unlike in fish, it does not mix. How this happened, we will discuss shortly. As primitive heart evolved in lungfish and amphibians, the division into two circulations, pulmonary and systemic, came into being, and with it the problem of the mixing oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in the heart. Amphibians accomplished the complete separation of atrium, but the ventricle is still undivided in this group. Fish is the most simple-hearted of all vertebrates. As we just mentioned, the heart consists of two chambers. Majority of the reptiles have partially separated ventricle. Complete division of the ventricle into two separate chambers is found in a few reptiles, alligators, caimans, crocodiles, and gharials, and in all birds and mammals. They have an effect, two hearts in one. Since oxygenated blood in the left side of the normal heart is completely separated from deoxygenated blood in the right side. From fish to mammal, there is increased separation between the two sides of hearts, with a consequent decrease of the amount of mixing between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. The blood is forced out by the heart through strong tubes called arteries. The veins carry the blood back to the heart. Keeping this in mind, answer the question, which blood vessels might be the strongest and thickest ones? Arteries? You are correct if you think so. But why? Because they have to withstand the pressure of the blood that is pumped out of the heart. The veins are not needed to be tough. After all, they simply drain the blood back to the heart. Three coats of layers are found in both arteries and veins. The outmost layer or coat is called Tunica Externa. It is composed of connective tissue. Note on this diagram that muscle tissue is found in the middle layer of tunica media of both arteries and veins. It is important to know, however, that the muscle layer is much thicker in arteries than in veins. Arteries play significant role in maintenance of blood pressure because with their muscular layer, they are able to contract, squeezing the blood and thereby raising blood pressure. When they relax, the vessel opens and blood pressure is lowered. The innermost tunica of arteries and veins called tunica intima. It is smooth endothelium surrounded by connective tissue sheaths. You see the connective tissue sheaths on this slide as a thick dark line. A common problem in older persons is arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. It is caused by calcium deposits in the arterial connective tissue and loss of elasticity and formation of cholesterol plaques lining the artery over time. It can put blood flow at risk as arteries become blocked. Arteriosclerosis is the primary cause of coronary artery disease and stroke. Here we're getting to a very important point in the whole circulatory system. What interconnects arteries with the veins are capillaries, tiny blood vessels. It is across the one-cell thin wall of the capillaries that most of the exchange of materials between the blood and other tissue takes place. Arterial capillaries drop off oxygen and nutrients to the body's cells. Venous capillaries pick up the metabolic waste from the body cells. The capillaries then are the functional units of circulatory system. It is important to remember that exchange of materials occurs not via arteries or veins, but via capillaries, one-cell thick blood vessels. The role of every part of the system is simply to assist them. Since capillary bed communicate closely with all cells, you can assume that total surface area is immense. All vertebrates, including humans' vascular system, have certain features in common. So in brief, here is how cardiovascular system works. A heart pumps the blood into arteries and that branch and narrow into arterioles, then into a vast system of capillaries. After blood in capillaries give out oxygen, nutrients, and vitamins to the cells and pick up carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste from the cells, blood leaving the capillaries enters venules and then veins that return the blood to the heart. As it is apparent from the diagram on this slide, veins are commonly thinner walled than arteries. The cross section we see that a vein contains some of the same regions we saw in the artery, but while the thinner layer of tissue is similar, the middle tissue layer typically contains much less muscle and is not as elastic. The pressure in veins is only a small fraction of that in arteries. The onward movement of blood in the veins is assisted by one-way valves. Because of the greatly reduced blood pressure in veins, this is one-way valves help blood in getting back to the heart. In the chest area, breathing movements squeeze the walls of the vessels, sending the blood towards the heart. The valves prevent backflow of the blood. Muscular movements in the arms and legs also assist venous flow. A contracting muscle exerts a massaging or squeezing action against the veins. If you have been in one position for a long time, you feel the need to stretch. This is actually just a way of squeezing out all blood and letting fresh, invigorating blood enter the muscles. Soldiers forced to stand at attention for a long time may pass out because there is not enough muscular movement to force sufficient blood to the heart and on up the brain. There could be problems in returning blood to the heart against force of gravity. When we stand upright, blood tends to collect in the veins of our legs and feet. People who spend a lot of time on their feet may develop varicose veins. When one-way valves become weakened or damaged, blood can collect in the veins. Varicose veins, permanently swollen veins that look twisted and bumpy from pooled blood. They can appear anywhere, but they're most common in the legs and feet. Damaged vein valves can occur as a result of aging or hereditary factors. This can also result from sitting or standing for extended periods, leading a sedentary lifestyle or being overweight. When the vein valves become damaged or weakened, the blood can no longer flow properly. As I said, the onward movement of the blood in the veins is assisted by one-way valves. The presence of these valves was first demonstrated by William Harvey in the 17th century. But the demonstration is elegantly simple and repeatable. The tourniquets used by Harvey are a bit dangerous. So if you like to repeat his experiment, simply grasp your arm with your other hand, preferably the one on the other arm, and let a partner trace the valves. Evolving for many millions years, vertebrates develop a double circulation. This is a very important point, so please pay closer attention. The blood that flows to and away from the lungs is referred to as pulmonary circulation. Note that in pulmonary circuit, the arteries carry deoxygenated blood and the veins carry oxygenated blood. Systemic circulation is the flow of blood to all organs of the body except the lungs. The arteries of the systemic circulation carry oxygenated blood, and the veins carry deoxygenated blood. I am not about to discuss all the pathways of the human systemic circulation, but I would like to consider a few interesting circuits. The blood in systemic circulation that passes through vessels in the kidneys is called renal circulation. The aorta sends the right and left branches, renal arteries, into the kidneys where nitrogenous waste, urea, excess water, miscellaneous metabolic byproducts, and some salts are removed from the blood. Blood returns from the kidneys via renal veins to the inferior vena cava and then to the heart. The hepatic portal circulation is a system of veins comprising the hepatic portal vein and its tributaries. It is responsible for directing blood from the regions of the gastrointestinal tract between esophagus and rectum, and also includes venous drainage from the supplementary organs such as spleen and pancreas. Coronary circulation supplies the heart with blood. Let us now look closely at pumping device, the mammalian heart, which includes human heart as well. This type of heart, four-chambered with complete separation of sides, is characteristic of mammals and birds, the two groups of vertebrate organisms commonly known as warm-blooded. As you already learned from previous lecture, warm-blooded animals, including humans, are those that maintain relatively constant high body temperatures regardless of the changes in the environmental temperatures. They have high metabolic rate and very precise internal control mechanisms. Therefore, constant perfusion of the tissues with oxygenated blood is clearly essential to them. It would be highly disadvantageous to such animals if the oxygenated blood returning to the heart from the lungs were mixed with the deoxygenated blood returning from the body tissues. The size of human heart is about with the size of the fist of its owner, and it is made of strong muscles called cardiac muscles. The human heart is a muscular organ located in the thorax and covered by the tough, fibrous sac, the pericardium. You perhaps heard of a condition known as pericarditis. This is inflammation of the pericardium. Itis means inflammation. The cause of pericarditis is often unknown, though viral infections are a common reason. Pericarditis may occur after a respiratory or digestive infection. Chronic or recurring pericarditis may be caused by autoimmune disease such as lupus, scleroderma, or rheumatoid arthritis. Here on both diagrams, pericardium differentiated into parietal pericardium, the outside of the pericardial sac, and into visceral pericardium. Visceral means internal, so internal side of the sac. This layer encloses the pericardial cavity, which contains pericardial fluid. The walls of the heart itself are known as myocardium, and the layers inside the heart is endocardium. Learning these parts of the body and remembering that itis means inflammation, you can now name clinical conditions one might have, such as endocarditis. Endocarditis is a real life-threatening inflammation of the endocardium. Endocarditis is usually caused by an infection. Bacteria, fungi, or other germs get into the bloodstream and attach to the damaged areas of the heart. Many people with endocarditis are successfully treated with antibiotics. Sometimes surgery may be needed to fix or replace damaged heart valves and clean up any remaining signs of the infection. The inflammation can reduce the heart's ability to pump blood. Myocarditis can cause chest pain, shortness of breath, and rapid or irregular heart rhythms known as arrhythmias. Some people with early myocarditis don't have symptoms. Others have mild symptoms. Sometimes myocarditis symptoms are like heart attack. If you are having unexplained chest pain and shortness of breath, seek emergency medical help. The heart of humans, like a heart of all other mammals and birds, is doubled. There is a right heart and there is a left heart. These are tightly fastened together. It is two pumps separated by interventricular septum. Septum means wall. The left heart is stronger than the right one because it has harder work to do. It pushes blood through the whole systemic circuit. Each half of the heart has two elastic tubes at the top of it. One tube carries the blood in and other carries it out. The deoxygenated blood first goes into the right heart, and when it is full, it squeezes upon the blood and forces it out through the other tube called pulmonary artery and sends it to the lung. As you remember, we call it pulmonary circuit. Then oxygenated blood returns from the lungs, enters left heart, and is pumped via aorta to body, or as we call it, systemic circuit. Aorta is the largest artery in the body. And again, the right heart collects deoxygenated blood from the large veins, the superior and inferior venae cavae, and via pulmonary artery sends it to the lungs for the oxygenated pickup. Now here I want to stop and talk about pronunciation. You see, we say superior and inferior venae cavae because it is plural. We're talking about two veins. But when we talk about one vein, such as superior vena cava, pronunciation is different. You see, the plural is venae cavae, and the singular is vena cava. When we say superior vena cava or inferior vena cava, or we can say superior and inferior venae cavae. Now let's take a look at the valves of the beating heart. After entering the right atrium, deoxygenated blood pumped through the tricapsid valve and enters the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, blood in the right ventricle is pumped through the pulmonary semilunar valve to pulmonary artery and eventually to the lungs, where oxygen is added and carbon dioxide is lost. As you see in this animation, oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium of the heart through 4 pulmonary veins. It then passes through the mitral valve, or another word for it is bicapsid valve, into the left ventricle. So it passes through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, blood is forced through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta and distributed to the body as a whole. So it goes through the systemic circuit. So what we learn is that the two sides of the heart actually pump blood through the two separate circulations and function as two separate pumps. The pulmonary circulation involves movement of blood through the right ventricle to the lungs, and the systemic circulation involves movement of the blood from the left ventricle throughout the body as whole. While the heart is squeezing the blood, it can be felt through the side of the body. This is called a heartbeat. Even though the human heart is double, the two halves beat essentially in unison. Beating is an inherent capacity of the cardiac muscle. This muscle begins rhythmic contraction very early in the embryonic development of individual. Long before birth, the contractions continue without pause throughout life. Beating heart contracts and relaxes. Contraction is called systole and relaxing is called diastole. During systole, your ventricle forcing blood into your lung and your body. The right ventricle contracts a little bit before your left ventricle does. Your ventricles then relax during diastole and filled with blood coming from an upper chamber of the left and right atria. Then the cycle starts over again. Each heartbeat makes a wave of blood in the artery, which can be felt when the artery is near the skin. This wave is called a pulse and is best felt at the wrist. The heart beats about 75 times each minute. Running or other work of any kind makes it beat faster so as to send more blood to the cells which are working. That beating inherent in the heart itself and not depend upon stimulation from central nervous system. This can easily be demonstrated by cutting all the nerves connection to the heart. Such a heart will continue to beat in a normal manner, although the rate of beat might change slightly. The heart of a frog or turtle can continue to beat even after a complete removal from the animal's body if it is placed in a solution with a proper osmotic concentration. Clearly, the initiation of the beat and the beat itself are intrinsic properties of the heart, but the rate of beat is partially regulated by nerves stimulation. The heart muscle, like every other organ or tissue in our body, needs oxygenated blood to survive. Blood is supplied to the heart by its own vascular system called coronary circulation. We mentioned it once before. Coronary arteries, they supply oxygen blood to the heart muscle. Cardiac veins then drain away blood after it has been deoxygenated. Your heart also has an electrical wiring which keeps it beating. Electrical impulses begin high in the right atrium next to the entry of superior vena cava. As a node starts the spark and passes it further via special pathway to a V node, which located on the back of the heart between the right atria and right ventricle. The spark is passed to the next relay station called the bundle of His, which is located in the heart septum, which is a cardiac muscle. The bundle of His is named after Wilhelm His, the Swiss cardiologist who discovered the bundle. From bundle of His, the spark goes to the Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers are branching in all directions. The electrical circuit system keeps your heart beating in a coordinated and normal rhythm, which in turn keeps your blood circulating. As you already know, the continuous exchange between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is what keeps you alive. The blood vessels that vascularize the central nervous system possess unique properties, termed the blood-brain barrier, which allows these vessels tightly regulate the movement of ions, molecules, and cells between the blood and the brain. Blood-brain barrier is also a roadblock to microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi, or viruses or parasites that may be circulating in the bloodstream. In other words, blood has a lot of junk in it, which we refer to as metabolic waste, and which is toxic to the brain cells. Our brain cells are too precious to be exposed to its own blood. So in fact, exposure to the blood would be deadly to our brain cells. This does not mean that our brain has no blood vessels. Of course, neural tissue is vascularized, but the brain blood vessels are much less permeable than the blood vessels in other parts of your body. In fact, the only thing that can leave and get from the brain blood vessels are small, tiny molecules, such as molecules of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. The only food our brain cells can have is glucose molecules. So glucose also able to pass through. As you might be aware, alcohol molecules can get there too. Stroke and bleeding, or hemorrhage as we call it, in the brain often deadly to a patient. Blood spill in the brain will destroy brain cells. On the slide, you see Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible, who in fury of rage accidentally killed his own son by a blow to the head with the point of his scepter. This happened in 1581. Hemorrhage or blood loss is a blood escaping from circulatory system from damaged blood vessels. It can occur internally or externally, either through natural openings such as mouth, nose, ears, urethra, vagina, or anus, or through wound in the skin. As the blood circulates rapidly through the blood vessels, the liquid portion, or as we call it plasma, is forced through the walls of the capillaries by a combination of pressure in the arteries and osmotic pressure. It finds its way as tissue fluid into the minute spaces between and around the cells, passing all of them. You see, the body cannot be nourished with protein, sugar, oxygen, and other digested food in the blood until the food passes out through the thin walls of the capillaries. But many of the body cells do not touch capillaries, and the lymph penetrates the spaces between the cells to reach them. If there were no lymph spaces, these cells could not get any food. The lymph passes the cells, and the cells absorb what they need from the nourishing fluid. Oxygen from erythrocytes passes through the walls and reaches the cells through the lymph in the lymph spaces. The waste materials must go back into the blood. Carbon dioxide passes back through the capillary walls and is taken to the lungs, so we can exhale it. Lymphatic vessels located throughout the body. Most of the lymphatic vessels have valves like those in veins to keep the lymph flowing in one direction, towards the heart. Lymph capillaries collect fluid and pass it to the larger lymph vessels that return the fluid to veins. The collected fluid, called lymph, are milky body fluids that contains leukocytes, proteins, fats, and occasional bacteria and viruses. Milky color of lymph due to the presence of suspended fats. Unlike vessels in the blood vascular system, the lymphatic vessels do not form a closed ring or circuit. Once lymph is formed from the interstitial fluid in the soft tissue of the body, it flows only once through its system of lymphatic vessels before returning into the blood through the large neck veins. Lymph does not flow over and over again through vessels that form circular route. Please remember that. Lymph nodes filter lymph. The lymph nodes are scattered throughout the body. There are hundreds of lymph nodes clustered in the areas of the digestive tract, neck, armpits, and groin. Lymphatic vessels carry lymph into and out of each lymph node. Lymph nodes remove cellular debris and abnormal cells from the lymph before returning it to the cardiovascular system. When the lymphocytes are active, the nodes may become painfully swollen. What you see on the 1773 illustration is lymphogranuloma venereum, a condition due to sexually transmitted infection. The lymph nodes in the groin are painfully swollen. The spleen is the largest lymphatic organ. The spleen assists lymphatic system in cleansing the blood of foreign material, invading microorganisms, old, worn-out cells. Notice that the main distinction between the spleen and lymph nodes is the fluid they cleanse. The spleen cleanses the blood, and the lymph nodes cleanse lymph. The spleen also helps to fight infections. The swollen spleen can sometimes be felt as a lump at the upper left abdomen, and this might be sign of infectious mononucleosis, also known as mono, or you might know it as a kissing disease. Disease primarily caused by Epstein-Barr virus. The virus that causes mono, the Epstein-Barr virus, is spread through saliva. You can get it through kissing. But you can also be exposed by sharing a glass or food utensils with someone who has mono. Many people get it from the drinking water in the restaurants from poorly washed glasses. Also, the symptoms of mononucleosis are uncomfortable. The infection resolves on its own without long-term effects. Most adults have been exposed to the Epstein-Barr virus and have built up antibodies. So we're talking now about why sometimes spleen can be enlarged. Besides kissing disease, it could be a sign of leukemia. Leukemia is a broad term for cancers of the blood cells. Scientists do not understand the exact causes of leukemia. It seems to develop from a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Bilobed organ called thymus is a member of the endocrine, lymphatic, and immune systems. It is located in the chest between the lungs. It houses developing lymphocytes and secretes hormones that regulate their activity later on. The size and activity level of the thymus is vary with age. It is largest and most active during childhood. During adolescence, it stops growing and then slowly starts to shrink. Perhaps because of our defense mechanisms are typically well established in adolescence. In old age, the thymus may disappear entirely. It gets replaced by fibrous and fatty tissue. The tonsils are a pair of soft tissue masses located at the rear of the throat. Tonsils protect the throat. The lymphocytes in the tonsils gather and filter many of the microorganisms that enter the throat. Tonsillitis is an acute inflammation of the tonsils, usually caused by Streptococcus infection. The surgical removal called tonsillectomy used to be most common surgical procedure performed on children, but it is done less often today. Tonsillitis is now usually treated with antibiotics. Adenoids, also known as a pharyngeal tonsil, are on the walls of the throat behind the nasal cavity. Adenoids tend to enlarge during early childhood, but at the most people they start to shrink after age 5 and usually disappear by puberty. Sometimes they continue to enlarge and obstruct airflow from nose to throat. Like the tonsils, the adenoids can be surgically removed if they grow large enough to cause problems. The central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, lacks lymphatic vasculature. However, there is a network of lymphatic extends upon dura mater surrounding them. Dura mater is the two protective layers of connective tissue that in most areas fuse together. I will elaborate on the topic in the lecture on the central nervous system. Sometimes bacteria and other germs can get into the circulatory system from a wound. Septicemia is a serious bloodstream infection. It occurs when a bacterial infection enters the bloodstream from elsewhere in the body, such as the skin, lungs, kidneys, bladder, or wound. It is dangerous because the bacteria and their toxins can be carried throughout the bloodstream to your entire body. Septicemia can quickly become life-threatening, and it must be treated in hospital. If left untreated, septicemia can progress to sepsis, blood poisoning. Septicemia and sepsis are not the same. Some people use the word septicemia and sepsis as if they mean the same thing, but technically septicemia is an infection that happens when bacteria or other germs enter the bloodstream and spread throughout the body. That can trigger sepsis, which is the body's reaction to the infection. Although the terms are sometimes used interchangeably. Sepsis, a serious complication of septicemia. Sepsis causes inflammation throughout the body. This inflammation can cause blood clots and block oxygen from reaching vital organs, resulting in organ failure. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that over 1.7 million adults in the United States develop sepsis each year. Almost 270,000, or about 16% of them, may die from the condition. Not the red sticking up the arm from involvement of the lymphatic system. If you notice a red tracking line anywhere on your body, arm, torso, neck or legs, or anywhere else, go to the emergency room immediately. This is very serious condition if not treated right away. This means infection spreads out of the wound site to enter the lymphatic system. Condition known as lymphaginitis is an inflammation of an infection or an infection of lymphatic channels. The wound may be small, or it may be an abscess constantly feeding bacteria into the lymphatic system. After infection, lymph nodes enlarge. Ear, skin, nose, and eyes infection can spread into the lymphatic system. Red streaks in the skin along the direction of regional lymph nodes indicate lymphatic involvement. Infection may spread with hours and can cause sepsis and death. What you see on this slide is forearm lymphangitis due to cellulitis of the hand. Cellulitis is a type of infection that affects the skin and the tissue underneath. The germs that are most responsible for this life-threatening condition are bacteria, including Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and E. coli. And again, septicemia requires immediate treatment to prevent the condition from worsening to sepsis. Infections caused by bacteria are treated with antibiotics. The type of antibiotics one needs depends on the type of bacteria that cause the infection. If the infection is caused by virus or fungi, treatment will include an antiviral or antifungal medication. Healthcare provider also may recommend draining blood and fluid from the infected area. Now let's see if you were able to remember some of the material we covered. Do you remember the names and locations of the heart valves? What valves do you clearly see in this slide? You are correct if you say tricuspid valve, pulmonary valve, and mitral valve. What you don't see here is aortic semilunar valve. Why is the right side of the heart smaller? The right side of the heart is smaller because it pumps blood only to the lungs. Remember the pulmonary circulation. Besides humans, what other animals have four-chambered heart? Pause if you have to. Think about it. The right answer is some reptiles, crocodilians, and all birds and mammals. What are the largest vein in the body? Superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Or we can say it superior and inferior venae cavae. What are the functions of the superior and inferior venae cavae? Well, these veins return blood to the right atrium after the blood has circulated through the body. In what chamber of the human heart does the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mix? Yes, this was a tricky question. In humans, like in birds and mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood does not mix. What usually causes endocarditis? The answer is simple: an infection. What are the main functional units of the human circulatory system? A capillary. What are the three layers that make up the heart? Pericardium, outer layer, myocardium, middle layer, and endocardium, innermost layer. For students who actually learn the prefixes, this shouldn't be very difficult. Peri means around, cardium, heart, around the heart. Myo means muscle, myocardium, middle heart, cardiac muscle is in the middle. And endocardium, endo means inside, and cardio, heart, right? So obviously it is innermost layer, the lining of the heart. What medical condition do you see on this slide? This is blood poisoning. You can see it right away because of the red streaks on the hand of the child. Here you see red tracking lines. We refer to them as tracking lines. What do you do if you identify this on you or on somebody else? You should seek medical help immediately. So what we'll learn in this lecture is that circulatory system is basically a set of connecting tubes that transport fluid and is considered to be a closed system. The ability of human or other organisms to adjust to immediate physiological changes in physical and metabolic activity depends on the rapid response of this system. The circulatory system includes blood and lymph vascular system. Human heart, like heart of other mammals and birds, is four-chambered. We learned that the heart upper chamber receives blood and the two lower chambers propel it. Valves separate the upper and lower chambers from the arteries. Arteries lead to the heart, to the arterioles, to capillaries, where the gases are exchanged. And the capillaries feed to the venules, and then veins leading back to the heart, where the circle starts again. The blood flow does not begin nor end, but makes a never-ending circle. Lymphatic system is a second circulatory system. Do not confuse it with a separate and distinct blood circuits, such as pulmonary circuit and systemic circuit. The lymphatic system does not circulate fluids, but simply drains to return to the blood. Yes, lymph does not flow over and over again through vessels that form circular route. As Nelson Mandela put it, a good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination.